The champagne flowed freely at the Metropolitan Development Association's annual gala, where crystal chandeliers cast golden light upon the industry's elite. Olivia Reed stood near the edge of the ballroom, her emerald dress a stark contrast to the sea of black tuxedos surrounding her. At 28, she was notably younger than most attendees, but her portfolio of innovative architectural designs had earned her an invitation to this prestigious event. "Deep breath," she whispered to herself, clutching the small portfolio containing her urban renewal concept. Tonight was her chance to present her vision to James Harrington, whose Harrington developments dominated the city's skyline. One conversation with him could transform her career from promising junior architect to revolutionary voice in sustainable urban planning. "You look like you're plotting something serious," came a warm voice beside her. Daniel Porter, James's head of operations and her friend from graduate school, appeared with 2 glasses of champagne. "Is it that obvious?" Olivia accepted the drink gratefully. "I've been rehearsing my pitch all week." Daniel smiled encouragingly. "James values innovation. Just be confident your ideas are brilliant." Across the room, James Harrington commanded, attention without effort. At 42, his salt and pepper hair and tailored tuxedo embodied success. Forbes had recently valued his company at $3 billion, and his reputation for ruthless business acumen preceded him. "There's your opening," Daniel nudged her gently as James momentarily stood alone. "Go now, before he's surrounded again." Heart pounding, Olivia approached. "Mr. Harrington? I'm Olivia Reed. I'd be honored if you'd consider a concept I've developed for the Riverside District renewal." James turned, his steel blue eyes assessing her with practiced efficiency. "The Thompson and Barrett project architect? Your work on." Their headquarters showed promise. Surprise flickered across her face. "You're familiar with my work?" "I make it my business to know talented people in this industry," he replied smoothly. "Walk with me?" For 20 minutes, Olivia outlined her vision for transforming the decaying Riverside District into a model of sustainable community development. Affordable housing integrated with green spaces, renewable energy systems, and community-owned businesses to prevent gentrification. "The revolutionary aspect is the community trust structure," she explained, showing him her sketches. "Residents become stakeholders. As property values increase, they benefit rather than being displaced." James studied her plans, his expression unreadable. Then, to her dismay, he laughed not unkindly, but with the condescension of someone addressing a naive child. "Ms. Reed, your idealism is refreshing, but utterly impractical. Community ownership, integrated social services? These concepts don't generate the returns investors demand. But the long-term sustainability, the market doesn't reward long-term sustainability," he interrupted. "It rewards quarterly profits." As they returned to the main ballroom, others had gathered around, including several influential developers and journalists. James, perhaps loosened by champagne or enjoying his position of authority, continued more loudly. "Dreams and social. Idealism don't finance construction loans, Ms. Reed. This industry requires practical solutions, not academic theories." Heat rushed to Olivia's cheeks as murmurs and uncomfortable glances spread through the onlookers. She became acutely aware that her professional humiliation was becoming a spectacle. "With respect, Mr. Harrington," she managed, fighting to keep her voice steady, "every revolutionary idea seems impractical until someone proves otherwise." His smile never reached his eyes. "When you've built something taller than a Model Inn, an architecture studio, perhaps your opinions will carry more weight." The crowd's uncomfortable laughter felt like physical blows. Daniel stepped forward, attempting to redirect the conversation, but the damage was done. Olivia excused herself with as much dignity as she could muster, making her way toward the exit dot in the quiet of the coach room. She allowed herself one moment of complete vulnerability, a single tear escaping before she ruthlessly wiped it away. "He's wrong," came a gentle voice. Eleanor Winters, a respected urban planning professor, stood in the doorway. "And someday he'll realize it." "Thank you," Olivia whispered, "but tonight doesn't exactly inspire confidence." Eleanor handed her a business card. "I'm leading a research initiative at the Urban Development Institute. We need forward-thinking architects like you." Olivia stared at the card, a seed of determination taking root. "I appreciate the offer, but I think tonight has shown me something important." "What's that?" "That working within existing structures isn't enough." She straightened her shoulders. "I need to build my own." Outside, snow had begun to fall over the city skyline, the same skyline she had dreamed of reshaping. As her taxi pulled away from the gala, Olivia made a silent promise to herself. She would return to this world not as a supplicant seeking approval, but as a force that could not be dismissed. What she couldn't know was that 7 years later, their paths would cross again, with their positions dramatically reversed, and secrets between them that would change everything. 7 years could transform landscapes, both urban and personal. Olivia Reed gazed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office at Meridian Developments, watching the city that had once seemed impenetrable to her vision now embrace it. The East Side Commons, her company's first major project, had won international acclaim for its innovative blend of sustainable architecture and community-centered planning. "The Chicago delegation is here," announced Natalie, her executive assistant. "Conference Room A." "Thank you," Olivia replied, gathering her presentation materials. "Has Rachel confirmed the school tour for Sophie this afternoon?" "Yes, she—" "Pick her up directly from Brookside Academy at 3. Olivia nodded gratefully. Balancing motherhood with running a rapidly expanding company required precision scheduling and a support network she'd carefully built over the years. As she walked through Meridian's headquarters, employees nodded respectfully. At 35, Olivia had transformed from a passionate but untested architect to an industry leader whose methods were studied in the very universities that had once taught her. Her dark hair was now cut in a sophisticated bob, and she traded tentative smiles for the confident demeanor of someone who no longer needed external validation the Chicago officials were seeking. Meridian's expertise for revitalizing their waterfront district, exactly the kind of project that made Olivia's heart race with possibilities. Across town, in a considerably less impressive office, James Harrington stared at foreclosure notices with increasing despair. The gleaming skyscraper that had once housed Harrington Development's headquarters had been sold months ago, one of many assets liquidated to service mounting debt. "Mr. Harrington?" His assistant, Teresa, appeared in the doorway. "The bank called." "Again about the Westfield loan." James nodded wearily. "Tell them we'll have an answer by Friday." When she left, he loosened his tie, still expensive, but now a relic from better days. At 49, stress had deepened the lines around his eyes and added more silver to his temples. The financial press, once effusive with praise, now dissected his downfall with the same relish they'd once celebrated his success. The catalyst had been his former partner, Victor, who had secretly sold their intellectual property to overseas developers, then vanished with millions. But the true cause ran deeper: a failure to adapt to changing markets, to see that sustainability wasn't merely idealistic, but economically essential as regulations tightened and client demands evolved. His phone buzzed with a text from his friend. "Daniel Porter, lunch tomorrow?" "Have something important to discuss." James agreed, grateful for one of the few friendships that had survived his fall. Daniel had left Harrington Developments years ago for a position he rarely discussed in detail. Their friendship had endured, though with a new awkwardness born of their reversed fortunes. The next day, at an unassuming bistro, Daniel arrived punctually, his expression suggesting news of consequence. "You look better than the last time, Daniel," observed, studying James. "Appearances can be deceiving," James replied. "But I'm working on something promising, the Riverton Heritage District proposal. Old industrial zone with historic protection, but development potential." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "That's actually related to why I asked to meet. My employer is interested in sustainable urban redevelopment projects." "Your mysterious employer." James smiled faintly. 7 years, and you still guard that information like a state secret. A moment of hesitation crossed Daniel's face. "James, I work for Meridian Developments." The name landed like a physical blow. "Olivia Reed's company?" James asked, though he knew the answer. "For 5 years now. I'm their strategic partnerships director." James absorbed this revelation with complex emotions. "Why tell me now?" "Because Meridian is looking for projects exactly like your Riverton proposal, and they have the financial backing you need." Daniel leaned forward. "This could save your company, James." "You want me to approach Olivia Reed?" The very suggestion seemed absurd given their history. "The woman I publicly humiliated? Who now controls the kind of capital I desperately need?" "She's not who she was 7 years ago," Daniel said carefully. "Neither are you." James stared into his coffee, remembering the young architect whose ideas he dismissed so carelessly. Why would she even consider it? Because the project has merit, and Olivia evaluates opportunities on their value, not personal history. Daniel paused. "Though I won't pretend it won't be complicated." That evening, James researched everything about Meridian Developments and its enigmatic founder. The company had grown exponentially, with projects across 3 continents and a reputation for transforming troubled urban areas into thriving communities. Exactly the vision Olivia had tried to share with him that fateful night. Articles praised her innovative financing models that allowed community stakeholders to benefit from development rather than being displaced by it. Awards lined her company's trophy wall. What he couldn't find was much about her personal life, just occasional mentions of her daughter, but never the child's father. 2 weeks later, James stood in the sleek reception area of Meridian Developments, proposal in hand, pride swallowed, necessity driving him forward. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly in recognition before she composed herself. "Mr. Harrington from Ms. Red, I believe I'm expected." As he waited, he noticed the wall of photographs showcasing Meridian's projects, vibrant communities where once stood urban decay. The very transformation he had once dismissed as impractical fantasy now stood as testament to his short-sightedness. When the boardroom doors opened, James steeled himself. But nothing could have prepared him for the sight of Olivia Reed at the head of the conference table, composed and powerful, surrounded by her executive team. "Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice cool but professional. "Welcome to Meridian Developments." Their eyes met across the polished table, her triumph unmistakable, his humiliation complete. Yet, as he took his seat, James recognized something unexpected in her gaze beyond the justified satisfaction. Genuine curiosity about what had brought him to her door after all these years. The boardroom at Meridian Developments hummed with a peculiar tension as James spread architectural renderings across the polished table. For 2 hours, he presented his vision for the Riverton Heritage District, a project that represented his last chance at professional redemption. The historical buildings would be preserved but repurposed, he explained, indicating the century-old warehouse complex. Mixed residential and commercial spaces, with green infrastructure throughout. Olivia listened intently, her expression giving nothing away. The executives beside her occasionally whispered questions in her ear or made notes, but she remained focused on James's presentation, studying both his plans and his demeanor with equal scrutiny. "And the financing structure?" she finally asked, Her first direct question. James hesitated. Initial investors are committed, but to realize the full scope, we need a partner with both vision and capital. The unspoken truth hung heavy. His company was hanging by a thread, and everyone in the room knew it. What happened with Westland Bank? Olivia asked, referencing his former primary financier. The question, precise and informed, caught him off guard. How did you due diligence, Mr. Harrington? Before this meeting, we researched your company's current position thoroughly. Of course she had. The Olivia Reed before him left nothing to chance. Gone was the eager young architect seeking approval. In her place sat a CEO who controlled the very resources he desperately needed. Westland withdrew support last month, he admitted, but the project's fundamentals remain strong. Daniel, seated at Olivia's right hand, spoke for the first time. The community integration aspects are particularly interesting. They align with Meridian's philosophy. A slight smile touched Olivia's lips. Yes, they do. Almost as if they were designed with our investment criteria in mind. James met her gaze directly. I've studied your company's approach. I've learned a great deal in recent years about what constitutes truly valuable development. Something shifted. In her expression, not softening, exactly, but a flicker of recognition. Ladies and gentlemen, she addressed her team, I'd like to speak with Mr. Harrington privately. We'll reconvene in 30 minutes. As the room cleared, leaving them alone with the weight of their shared history, James felt oddly vulnerable. The defensive arrogance that had once been his shield had been stripped away by failure. Why me? Olivia asked when the door closed. There are other development firms who would be less complicated partners. None with your expertise in exactly this type of project, he answered honestly, or your proven community integration models. She studied him, searching for deception. 7 years ago, you called those models impractical fantasies. 7 years ago, I was wrong. The admission cost him, but he delivered it without flinching. Your success has proven that beyond doubt. Olivia walked to the window, overlooking the city they both helped shape in different ways. Do you know what I did the night after that gala? She asked unexpectedly. James shook his head. I cried for exactly 10 minutes. Then I started writing a business plan for Meridian. She turned to face him. Your dismissal was possibly the most valuable gift anyone has given my career. I'd prefer not to take credit for your success, he said quietly. I'm not offering it, she replied with surprising candor. I built this company despite men like you, not because of them. What I'm trying to determine is whether you're still that man. Before he could answer, her phone chimed with a text message. Reading it, her professional demeanor softened momentarily. My daughter's school concert ran long, she explained, typing a quick response. Schedule adjustments. I didn't realize you had a child, James said, grasping at this personal detail. Sophie, she's 6. Something guarded entered Olivia's expression. Motherhood teaches priorities better than any business school. The conversation shifted back to the project, but James found himself distracted by this glimpse into Olivia's personal life. 6 years old. The timing nagged at him for reasons he couldn't articulate. When the executive team returned, Olivia had reached her decision. Meridian will consider a partnership under strict conditions. Quarterly performance reviews, community approval benchmarks, and our social impact team integrated into all planning phases. Hope surged through James. Those terms are acceptable. Don't agree so quickly, she cautioned. You haven't heard the most important condition. For this partnership to work, you'll relocate your operations here. Your team will work directly alongside ours, with complete transparency. The requirement was unexpected and would place him squarely under her authority in the very empire she'd built after his rejection. You want me working in your offices? He clarified. I want this project to succeed, she corrected. That requires close collaboration and, frankly, oversight. The executives watched their exchange with poorly concealed interest. This wasn't merely a business arrangement, but a public realignment of power between them. "I accept," James said finally. What choice did he have? As the meeting concluded and hands were shaken, Daniel approached James in the hallway. "That went better than expected, did it?" James asked wryly. "I'm essentially working for the woman I once dismissed as naive." Daniel's expression turned serious. "James, there's something you should understand about Olivia. She didn't agree to this partnership out of vindictiveness or to humiliate you." "Then why?" "Because the project has merit," Daniel said simply, "and because she believes people can change. The question is, have you?" As James left Meridian's headquarters, he caught sight of Olivia in the lobby, kneeling to embrace a dark-haired little girl who had just arrived with a caregiver. The child's laughter echoed across the marble floor as Olivia listened intently to what was clearly an important six-year-old story. In that unguarded moment of maternal joy, James saw a different Olivia from either the ambitious young architect he'd dismissed or the powerful CEO who now controlled his fate. And something about the child, a gesture, the shape of her face, tugged at his memory in ways he couldn't define. The Riverton Heritage District site visit was scheduled for early October, when the historic neighborhood showed its best face brick buildings warmed by autumn sunlight, ancient oaks lining the streets with gold and crimson canopies. James arrived early, walking the perimeter of the abandoned factory complex that anchored the project. "It has good bones," came Olivia's voice behind him. He turned to find her dressed more casually than he'd seen since their reunion practical. Boots, jeans, and a tailored jacket. For a disorienting moment, she reminded him of the younger Olivia, full of enthusiasm and untempered vision. "That's what my grandmother used to say about fixer-upper houses," he replied. Smart woman. Olivia approached the rusted gate. "I've always loved this building, even as a child." This personal revelation surprised him. "You knew this neighborhood growing up?" She nodded, unexpected warmth entering her voice. "I grew up 6 blocks from here. My parents still run their restaurant on Maple Street Homestead Kitchen." As they waited for the project team to arrive, Olivia pointed out landmarks with the intimacy of someone showing childhood haunts. The corner store where she bought penny candy. The park where she sketched building designs as a teenager. "This neighborhood is why I became an architect," she admitted. "I watched developers tear down perfectly good buildings for characterless boxes that priced out families who'd lived here for generations." "Including yours?" James asked carefully. "We were lucky. My parents owned their building." Her expression clouded. "Many weren't." The team arrived: architects, engineers, community liaisons, and the professional mask slipped back into place. Throughout the day, however, James noticed how residents greeted Olivia with familiar affection rather than the deference typically shown to powerful executives. "Ms. Reed," called an elderly man from his porch. "Tell your mother I'm still waiting for that pie recipe she promised." Olivia laughed, a sound James had never heard from her in their professional interactions. "I'll remind her, Mr. Abernathy, but you know she guards her secrets." As they turned the corner, a neighborhood cafe came into view. Homestead Kitchen, a charming establishment with window boxes and a line stretching down the sidewalk. "Your parents' place?" James asked, noting the activity. "My childhood home, converted after I left for college." Pride colored her voice. Mom's cooking always deserved a bigger audience. Through the windows, James glimpsed a dark-haired child, sitting at a corner table, drawing intently, while an older woman, presumably Olivia's mother, placed a cookie beside her paper. "Is that your daughter?" he asked, the question escaping before he could consider its implications. Something guarded returned to Olivia's expression. Yes, Sophie spends Wednesdays with her grandparents while I have board meetings. The girl looked up as if sensing their gaze, waving enthusiastically when she spotted her mother. And in that unguarded moment, illuminated by sunlight through the cafe window, James felt the air leave his lungs. The child's eyes, a distinctive gray-green that he saw in the mirror each morning, the shape of her mouth when she smiled, the way she tilted her head slightly when concentrating on her drawing, familiar features that couldn't be coincidental. "She looks like you," he managed, his voice strangely hollow. "Everyone says she has my determination," Olivia replied carefully, waving back at her daughter while avoiding James's gaze. The project team moved ahead while they lingered momentarily, suspended in an unspoken question neither seemed prepared to address. Later that afternoon, as the technical discussions concluded, Olivia's mother appeared with a basket of still-warm pastries for the team. Eleanor Reed was a gracious woman with Olivia's dark hair now threaded with silver and the same direct gaze. "You must be Mr. Harrington," she said when introduced, her tone polite, but with an undertone that suggested she knew exactly who he was. "Olivia has mentioned your collaboration." "Mrs. Red," he acknowledged, accepting a pastry. "Your restaurant is impressive." "A family endeavor," she replied, her eyes evaluating him with motherly perception. "Much like this project will be." As Eleanor departed, she hugged her daughter and whispered something that made Olivia glance briefly at James with an unreadable expression. That evening, alone in his temporary apartment, James researched everything he could find about Olivia's personal life during the period after the gala. There was little public information. She'd largely disappeared from industry events for nearly a year before emerging as the founder of Meridian's first incarnation. Sophie would have been conceived approximately 7 months after their last encounter. The timing aligned perfectly with what he now suspected, but could hardly believe. Their interaction at the gala had been entirely professional, except for one detail he'd nearly forgotten. After his public dismissal of her ideas, he'd followed her outside, momentarily regretful about his harshness. They'd argued again, more personally, but the tension between them had transformed into an unexpected night together, connection neither had acknowledged afterward. He'd dismissed it as a momentary lapse, and she'd never contacted him again, doubt now. Staring at his reflection in the window, James saw the same distinctive gray-green eyes that had stared back at him from a child's face in a cafe window. Eyes that couldn't be dismissed as coincidence. The realization shook him profoundly. Not just the possibility that he had a daughter he'd never known, but that Olivia had carried and raised this child alone, building her empire while nurturing a life connected to a man who had publicly humiliated her. His phone rang, displaying Daniel's name. "I need to ask you something," James said without preamble when he answered. "And I need absolute honesty." Daniel's silence was telling. "Sophie is my daughter, isn't she?" The question hung between them. After a long pause, Daniel sighed. "That's not my information to confirm or deny, James, but you've known all along." "I've known Olivia had a daughter," Daniel answered carefully. "Any resemblance you might have noticed is your own observation. Why wouldn't she tell me?" James demanded, anger and hurt mingling with a strange sense of loss for years he couldn't reclaim. "Put yourself in her position," Daniel replied gently. "You'd publicly ridiculed her professionally. Then after your encounter, you never contacted her again. When she discovered she was pregnant, what exactly was she supposed to do?" The truth of it hit James with crushing force. He had been unapproachable, arrogant, dismissive of everything she valued. Why would she have trusted him with something as precious as a child? "I need to talk to her," he said finally. "Tread carefully." "James," Daniel warned, "this isn't about your feelings or rights. This is about a little girl who has had a stable, loving life, and about a woman who has sacrificed and built something extraordinary while being both mother and father. After hanging up, James stood at his window, looking out at the city where his daughter had been living all these years without his knowledge. The painful irony wasn't lost on him. He had rejected Olivia's vision only to discover she had created not just a thriving company from that same vision, but a child he knew nothing about. Tomorrow, they had scheduled meetings about the community trust structure for Riverton. Instead, he would be confronting a truth that redefined everything about their past and future. Dawn broke over the city as Olivia completed her morning run, the ritual that had centered her through years of single motherhood and building Meridian from concept to corporation. Today, however, her thoughts remained turbulent despite the endorphins. She had seen the recognition in James's eyes yesterday, the moment when possibility became certainty. The secret she'd guarded for 6 years now hung between them. Unspoken but undeniable. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "We need to talk." Not about Riverton. She had expected this, had prepared for years, yet felt strangely unprepared. "My office, 7:30. Before the day begins." Showered and dressed in armor-like professional attire, Olivia arrived at Meridian's still quiet headquarters. To find James already waiting, his customary confidence replaced by an unfamiliar vulnerability. "She's mine, isn't she?" he asked without preamble when her office door closed behind him. Olivia met his gaze steadily. "Sophie is my daughter. Biologically, she's ours," he pressed, emotion straining his voice. "Yes." The confirmation hung between them. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question emerged more wounded and accusatory. Olivia moved to the window, gathering thoughts she'd rehearsed countless times for a conversation she'd never expected to have. "The night of the gala, after what happened between us, you made your priorities very clear," she began carefully. "You said it had been a mistake, that entanglements weren't part of your 5-year plan." James winced at his own callousness reflected back to him. "When I discovered I was pregnant weeks later, I considered telling you," she continued. "But you'd already shown me exactly who you were, someone who saw my professional vision as naive fantasy. Why would you have viewed my motherhood any differently?" "You didn't give me the chance to surprise you," he said quietly. "I couldn't risk Sophie being treated as an inconvenience or obligation." Her voice remained steady despite the emotion beneath. She deserved better than reluctant acknowledgement. James sank into a chair, the weight of revelations visibly pressing on him. "All these years, I've had a daughter." "Yes." "Does she know about me?" Olivia's expression softened slightly. "She knows her father was someone I once cared for, who wasn't ready to be a parent. Not that he abandoned her, but that sometimes adults make complicated choices." "That single quote's ... kinder than I deserve," he admitted. "It wasn't for you," she clarified. "It was for her. Children internalize rejection, make it about themselves. I wouldn't let her carry that burden." The silence between them felt less hostile now, filled instead with shared recognition of paths not taken and consequences neither had fully anticipated. "What happens now?" James finally asked. "That depends," Olivia replied, returning to her desk. "What are you seeking? Legal rights? Visitation? Or just the satisfaction of confirmation?" "I don't know," he admitted honestly. 24 hours ago, I didn't know I was a father. But I'd like the chance to know her if you're willing, and if it wouldn't disrupt her life." Olivia studied him, searching for the man she'd once known in the humbled figure before her. "Sophie's well-being comes first. Always. I wouldn't want anything else." She nodded slowly. "Then we start carefully. Friendship first, before any revelations. She knows you as my business partner. We can build from there, see if our relationship develops naturally." "Thank you," he said simply. The office began stirring with arriving employees. Their personal revelation, needed to be set aside for the professional responsibilities awaiting them both. "We have the community trust meeting at 9, Olivia reminded him, shifting back to CEO mode. "Yes," James agreed, following her lead. "Though I have some new thoughts after seeing the neighborhood yesterday." "Such as?" "The factory has historical significance beyond architecture. It was one of the first in the city with integrated workforce. Housing. We could honor that legacy through the housing trust structure." Olivia looked at him with genuine surprise. "That's actually an excellent idea." "I do occasionally have them," he replied with a faint smile. 3 months later, the Riverton project had progressed remarkably. The community trust was established. Construction had begun on the first phase, and James had relocated permanently to be closer to both the project and, though unspoken to Sophie, his introduction to her life had been gradual, first as her mother's colleague who occasionally joined them for ice cream after community meetings, then as a friend who helped with her science project on sustainable buildings, creating a model skyscraper together. On a crisp December evening, Olivia hosted a small holiday gathering at her home, a warm brownstone in the neighborhood she'd grown up in, lovingly restored to blend historical character with modern sustainability. Daniel was there with his wife, Olivia's parents, and a few close friends. James arrived with carefully chosen gifts, architectural books for Olivia, and a handcrafted dollhouse for Sophie, its tiny rooms filled with miniature furniture he'd spent weeks selecting. "It has solar panels," Sophie exclaimed, delighted to discover the tiny rooftop installation that actually powered miniature lights. "And rainwater collection," James showed her, demonstrating how the gutters connected to a small garden, "just like we're designing for Riverton." Watching them together, Olivia felt a complex emotion. She couldn't name the regret exactly, but acknowledgement of possibilities previously unimagined. Later, after Sophie had gone to bed and other guests had departed, Olivia and James sat before the fireplace with glasses of wine. The comfortable silence of colleagues who had become something more than friends, but not yet defined what that might mean. "She has your analytical mind," James observed. "The way she questioned the structural support for the dollhouse roof." "And your stubbornness," Olivia countered with a smile. "Once she starts something, wild horses couldn't drag her away." "Do you ever wonder," he began hesitantly, "what might have happened if I hadn't been such an arrogant fool that night? If I'd recognized what was in front of me, both professionally and personally?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I look at everything that followed, Meridian, Sophie, the communities we've helped build, and I can't regret the path that led here, difficult as it sometimes was." "You've created something remarkable," he acknowledged, "both in your company and in our daughter." The words hung between them, our daughter spoken aloud for the first time. "I was wrong about so many things," James continued quietly. "Your vision for development, the importance of community over profit, and most of all, letting my pride keep me from knowing the most important person in my life." "You're getting to know her now," Olivia reminded him. "That's what matters." "And her mother?" he asked, meeting her gaze directly. "Am I getting to know her again, too?" Olivia set down her wine glass, considering her answer carefully. "We're not who we were 7 years ago. You're not the man who dismissed my ideas, and I'm not the woman seeking validation. We've both been shaped by different forces into better versions of ourselves, I hope," he offered. "I think so," she agreed, "though I'd say my improvement is more dramatic since I started from a higher baseline." The teasing brought a genuine laugh from James. Fair assessment. Snow began falling outside, casting the room in peaceful quiet. In this moment of transition between past regrets and future possibilities, they found unexpected comfort in each other's company. "I don't know what happens next," Olivia admitted. "Co-parenting while maintaining our professional relationship is complicated enough. What if we simply take it one day at a time? James suggested. No grand declarations or promises neither. Of us can guarantee. Just two people who share a remarkable daughter and a vision for building something meaningful together. Whether that's just Riverton or something more personal. Olivia considered his words, the measured humility in them. So different from the man she'd known before. I think I can work with that approach. She finally agreed. Outside, the historic neighborhood slept peacefully under fresh snow. The same streets where Olivia had once dreamed of transformation, where Sophie now grew up, and where James had found unexpected redemption. The Riverton project would rise nearby, not as a monument to any individual's vision, but as testament to the power of second chances for buildings, communities, and sometimes for people who had lost their way only to find a better path forward. Together. In the morning, Sophie would wake to find her dollhouse illuminated by tiny solar-powered lights, her mother and father sharing coffee in the kitchen, and the first blueprints for Riverton's community center spread across the dining room table. The future taking shape through their combined vision, stronger and more beautiful than either could have created alone.